So today we're going to look at a set of brake pedals and look at the bias adjuster clevis mechanism. One, as far as initially setting this up, and then two, a maintenance from week to week or after a crash. So in this case, you put your master cylinders on. One thing you want to try to do is to screw your push rods into the clevis the same amount. It doesn't have a huge impact on the pressures from front to rear, because that's more of a ratio from the bearing to the center of the clevis. But from a consistency standpoint and keeping as much travel as we can in this bias adjuster from front to back, it keeps everything being bound up. So after you screwed your push rods in the same amount or as close as you can, you got it in the car, you should have about 26 rounds of adjustment from front to rear. If you have a substantially less number than that, look and make sure that the bias adjuster doesn't have any burrs on it. Make sure it's got lubrication on it. The other thing that's kind of critical to look at is when you jam your bias crank onto the adjuster, don't use a jam nut in the case where you're using the crank. Just use red Loctite on it. There's a broach on this end of the adjuster allow you to tighten that up. If you're running your master cylinders with your rear brake to the left side, you're going to be screwing your crank to the right to get rear brakes. If you're using your rear master cylinder to the right side of the car, you're going to be screwing the crank to the left to get rear brake. So that's very important, because a lot of people can mix match those and be adjusting the brakes backwards. From a maintenance standpoint, weekly, this threaded mechanism, the bias bar itself, needs to be cleaned. It needs to be lubricated and ran through its cycle a few times just to keep everything lubed up and adjusting correctly. The other thing that's critical to look at is after a crash, check your master cylinder push rods. Just pull the boot down and look at it. And also look at the bias crank, adjust it from front to rear, and make sure there's no bend in that bias crank, because that can substantially change the handling of your car. If you do those things, these are pretty trouble-free. You have to make sure you do some maintenance on them and keep them where they work freely.